If approved by voters, this proposal revises and reforms the functionality of the Independent Redistricting Commission, amongst the other things that you described. Is that correct?
To a large extent.
And this is the commission that was originally approved by voters through a statewide referendum in 2014.
That's the constitutional amendment.
And that constitutional amendment is what established the IRC,
And that's
correct?
the constitutional process.
Thank you. This isn't the first time that this body has looked to the voters to make changes to the IRC. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, we look to the voters for constitutional approval. And that's the American system. That's the New York system.
And previously,
the system of democracy with a small d.
And then previously, we did go back to the voters. This body voted to send another referendum back to the voters.
And you're... Which proposal are you discussing?
I'm referring to the proposal in 2021.
Oh, that's not what we're talking about here.
That's not what's at issue here. But certainly, Mr. Slater, we live in a constitutional democracy. We do not make changes to our Constitution for good reason, and that's the American system, without going to the people to support it or not support it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Levine. So in 2021, we did go back to the voters, and they rejected changes that were proposed to this very process that we're examining here. And I bring up 2021 because I do see some similar proposals that were made then that we're seeing today. And I wanted to just talk quickly about some of those proposals, specifically related to the approval of the commission's plans, because it now takes away the supermajority in this proposal, as it did in 2021, and it replaces it with a simple majority vote. Is that an accurate statement?
That's one way of looking at it.
Thank you. If the IRC's proposal is rejected by either the governor, the Senate, or the Assembly, this proposal would eliminate the IRC's right to create a second set of maps for us to consider under this proposal. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, I'm a big fan of rights, and I'm not so sure that it's a fair description of the IRC's responsibility to phrase it or describe it as a right.
But from a process standpoint, the change that we're making in this particular provision of the proposal, if any of those entities, the governor, the Senate, or the Assembly, reject the maps, currently it would go back to the IRC for a second round, but we're changing that in this instance.
The answer to that is yes.
Thank you. I want to look at, if we could, page 3, lines 7 and 8. It states, each house shall prepare a redistricting plan in the case where the IRC's only map is rejected. Are these maps submitted individually by each house like we do with one house budgets?
They're allowed to send more than one map. What does he mean by only map?
I'm not sure I follow what you mean by only one map.
Well, I'm just reading again. I want to make sure the interpretation is correct. So
well,
each house shall prepare a redistricting plan in the case where the IRC's only map is rejected. So my question is each house drafting their own maps, or is it going to be concurrent where they are presenting them together, one set of maps?
To clarify, in the IRC statute, in Section 5B of the Constitution, they can still send more than one proposal by that first deadline. So it's not just one map.
Our Constitution provides that the IRC can send more than one map. That's constitutional. There's nothing that restricts them, and I wouldn't want people to misconceive.
Right, but that's not my question, sir. My question here...
But I do appreciate you permitting me to answer what I take to be your question. That, after all, Mr. Slater, that's what debate is all about.
I'm looking forward to a lengthy one. Yes, sir.
And so there is no restricted number of maps that the IRC can send.
And I appreciate that, but that's not my question. My question remains. The text clearly states each house shall, and then we've inserted this new line, prepare a redistricting plan and introduce. So my question remains, is each house then charged with drawing their own maps to submit in case the IRC fails, or is it going to be done collectively? That's all I'm asking.
It can be done either way.
No, we have to come to consensus to enact maps, so eventually.
Well, the basic concept is whether there's a difference in approach to making the maps or drawing the maps or not, the legislature, that's the Senate and the Assembly, must come to a consensus.
And I understand that. Again, I'm just trying to understand if we are looking at this like we do with the state budget, where each house proposes its own one-house budget resolution. And so are we copying that model based on the insertion of this language that then would have each house produce its own maps for then, after that stage, consensus to be made? Or does that consensus get made beforehand? Again, it's just a new insertion in this piece of legislation
It's not new.
that we're going to be sending to the voters.
This
So
is
I just want to make sure I'm clear.
It's functionally not changing it.
We are essentially not changing the process.
Well, I would disagree with that, but
And in addition to which, we're not basing this on our tradition or our constitutional responsibility of both the Senate and the Assembly presenting their own budgetary proposals. Not based on that. It's not modeled on that at all.
So then it's your interpretation that there will be one set of maps in this instance, since it can't go back to the IRC, one set of maps that'll be put forward by both houses based on this language.
Maybe more.
Okay. The IRC can send more than one plan by or before the 15th. Currently, if we do not adopt them, it says each house
Yeah.
Just left.
Yeah.
amends and each house of legislature deems necessary to enact the
Not even done with
plan. This is the normal legislative process. We would have to come to consensus to present something to the governor. How that happens is not dictated in this currently or under the changes.
If the IRC is not able to send us its consensus maps, and we know how problematic that can be, then the process we will employ is the same as the process that we would have employed under the original constitutional provision. We will work out the maps. That's democracy.
Okay.
It's certainly not impossible, as we have seen.
Thank you very much. What entity within the legislature is going to be tasked with drawing and submitting these maps?
The Constitution does not speak to that. The amendment doesn't speak to that. Nothing in this speaks to that.
This bill does not speak to that.
I understand, but we are changing based on the insertion of this one particular clause. We're changing the process because you're also changing the IRC's ability to submit a second set. So again, I want to understand. So if the legislature is going to be submitting maps, who or what entity within the legislature is going to be charged with that?
No,
No.
we have LAP4.
Yes, and we also have the legislative
That's what it is.
apportionment.
No requirement under the Constitution to use or not use LAP4, but it exists.
So we have LAT4, and that's the Legislative Apportionment Task Force, and we are not contemplating binding the hands of any future legislature when it comes to the contingency or the possibility that you have described.
Understood. Since, similar to the 2021 referendum that, again, voters disapproved, this proposal also removes the requirement that a supermajority approve a plan when one party holds control of the Assembly and Senate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So in practicality, with the current makeup of the legislature under this proposal, it would only need a simple majority of the Senate and Assembly to approve the legislature's own map.
And sign by
Which Mr. Slater is consistent with almost every other constitutional provision when it comes to determining who wins and who doesn't win.
Except
It's
in
a
this case,
majority.
because it really doesn't, since the voters added to the Constitution a supermajority vote, a 60% vote, which was approved in 2014.
And we are proposing that the voters recognize how unwieldy a process that is and how problematic a process that is. And we are asking the voters to streamline the process for the purpose of efficiency. Because after all, Mr. Slater, if we improve the process, we improve the product. Do you not agree with me?
Well, I would not interpret it the same way you just did, and I don't think many voters are either, since they approved it in 2014, the supermajority, rejected the removal of the supermajority in 2021, but yet we're telling them that they're wrong again in 2026. But we can move on.
Mr. Slater, I don't presume to speak for all the voters, and the people of the state of New York are going to have the opportunity to evaluate this, and I'm sure you will do a very good job of letting them know how you feel, and you may rest assured I will do the same.
I know you will. I have full confidence in that. So in practicality, so the process you are proposing, really by removing the 60% requirement, you're really removing the need for bipartisanship in this process.
Actually, because even if the IRC set unanimous maps, and we would still need that, because they can send more than one set of maps by the 15th, and all we need is a simple majority vote, there's a better chance of getting bipartisan, because you only need 76 votes.
I don't agree with your assessment there. I have great faith in the people of the state of New York to make the correct decision, and I have great faith in all of us on either side of the aisle to do what is necessary to best protect the interests of the people of the state of New York. So I don't agree that this becomes a challenge to bipartisanship.
I disagree with that entirely. I'll move on to Section C. Section C provides direction for the drawing of the districts. Are these principles applied to Congress as well as the state legislative districts?
The answer to that is yes.
So currently under the law, when any legislative district or congressional district deviates from having an equally number of inhabitants, the IRC must provide a public explanation, correct?
That has been the case.
And this proposal, it eliminates that requirement. So moving forward, this level of public accountability is no longer required under the statute. Is that accurate?
Absolutely not, because the IRC, yes, and I will, if you permit me to respond to your question, Mr. Slater. I do my best not to talk over people.
I apologize.
When people talk over others, that's a rhetorical sign. So the IRC has to have hearings and has to listen to the public and has to communicate with the public. I, for one, and I'm sure you do as well, have great faith in the wisdom of the public.
Another principle that's been removed is compactness of districts. Why are we proposing to remove this provision in this amendment?
So let me respond first, in case any non-legislative people are watching this, and even if legislative people are watching this, I want to describe what compactness is. Compactness is the principle that constituents ought to live as close to each other as possible. That's a matter of community. Now, in New York State, downstate, people live much closer together than they do in the upstate rural areas, and I'm sure, I don't know if you know, but I grew up in those very rural, remote areas. So compactness doesn't mean the same for areas where there are a lot of people as it does for areas where there are not that many people. So many of the districts that are drawn in New York State are huge. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles. And it's tough to say that those are actually compact. What we do propose is that there continue to be a continuity of community interests in all the districts.
Has the IRC or even the special master, have they flagged the challenges of compactness as one of the defining principles when drawing these maps?
That I don't know.
So when we're saying, though, that compactness proves to be a challenge, where are we seeing that challenge? Who is identifying or who has identified that challenge?
It's just a matter of common sense.
Except that we're working right now and serving within districts that meet the criteria for compactness.
And those communities of interest will continue to be bound together. That's the American system. That's the heart and the soul of what democracy is all about.
But it's just not required anymore under the law, not only the law, but the Constitution, that we keep these communities, that we use the principle of compactness when drawing maps moving forward.
The word compactness will no longer be part of this constitutional approach. But the rationale that communities of interest must be protected, maintained, and served remains the essence of this constitutional approach.
One of the other principles that are cited in this current constitutional requirement is that maps are not drawn, and I quote, favoring or disfavoring incumbents or other particular candidates or political parties. So would you agree this is the provision that prohibits political or partisan gerrymandering in New York from occurring?
Gerrymandering is kind of a negative term.
The purpose of this constitutional amendment is to restore power to the people, not power to those of us who are privileged enough to have been elected.
Except you're removing that clause.
Precisely.
But you're removing a clause that prohibits political and partisan gerrymandering.
As well as incumbency protection.
As well as incumbency protection. Surely none of us have a problem with that, do we, as elected representatives of all the people of the state of New York?
I disagree completely with your interpretation, because right now it specifically states that you cannot draw a district based on an incumbent. And now we're doing the complete opposite. We're removing that protection. So you are in fact allowing incumbents to draw their own districts, because you are now removing this principle from the Constitution of New York State.
So let me, Mr. Slater, respond by stating that as the state constitution is currently drafted, there has been confusion, great confusion, as to whether every single principle set forth, which I'm not even sure would be possible to attain. In fact, in all likelihood, it would be impossible to attain, as well as whether some of these principles can or should be prioritized over others. So, yes, I think you realize what we're trying to do here on behalf of the people of the state of New York.
I would disagree with that interpretation, but I'm happy to move on. Turning our attention to section 6E, which is on page 5, it currently speaks to using courts as a remedy, correct?
I'm sorry, where are you on page 5?
If you can go to page 5, line, I believe it's line 2. It talks about
Yes, I see it.
courts as a remedy, correct?
Yes.
Have we had to use the courts in the last 5 years?
What do you think, abused or used?
You said used, not abused?
Used.
Used.
Have the courts in the last 5 years had to remedy a redistricting dispute, whether it's in congressional districts or state legislative districts?
There have been lawsuits, yes.
There have certainly been lawsuits, not just in New York, but certainly in all parts of New York.
And my recollection is, specifically in regards to 2022, the state said congressional maps were declared unconstitutional by the courts, and they were drawn by a special master. Am I accurate in that?
I think that that's a pretty good description of history.
And similarly, in 2022, our own assembly maps were declared invalid as well.
Those weren't court drawn, though. That wasn't special master drawn, though.
And those, of course, were not special master drawn.
I understand, but the courts still had to interject themselves, were brought in to interject themselves. After the election in 2023, the courts directed new assembly and congressional maps be drawn by the IRC. Is that correct?
In separate cases, yes.
In essence,
So the courts have had to step in to play referee,
This doesn't stop.
but under this new proposal, if it is deemed there's been a violation of the law, as we have seen happen the last few years, would the maps return to the legislature or to the IRC under this new proposal?
that's why we have courts. And that's why we have a constitution. And that's why we have a legislature.
Except in this proposal, Mr. Levine, my question was, is it going back to the legislature or is it going back to the IRC? Because it speaks directly to this in the proposal.
It's explicit in that it goes back to the legislature.
Thank you. Back to the legislature, which I find kind of peculiar, because the legislature is going to be the doctor applying the remedy to its own errors, essentially. Is that fair?
We are accountable to our voters.
You and I, and everybody else in this room who's elected, is accountable to the public. That's the way it should be.
But we're still empowering the legislature by making this particular change. We are no longer bringing an independent body to fix a problem that's potentially caused by the legislature. Instead, we're saying, legislature, you get a redo.
Mr. Slater, the IRC is still going to continue to function. And this will all be up to the public in the state of New York. If it passes in this legislature this year and passes again next year, and then goes to the voters for a constitutional referendum.
I'm looking forward to the referendum vote. There's a phrase in here about this particular process of sending it back to the legislature.
Yes.
And it talks about, it tries to establish a full and reasonable standard.
That's in the Constitution already.
Who determines
That
if the legislature has had a full and reasonable attempt or ability to remedy its potentially erroneous or unconstitutional or illegal
that
maps?
is in the Constitution.
It's in Section 5, Article 3.
If we read Section 5 of Article 3 of our Constitution, that's the system.
So we have the opportunity.
Have we seen this back and forth between the legislature, the IRC, and the courts before?
No, it's the first time the IRC operated was after 2020. It's the only.
Ping-ponging maps back and forth?
It's the only time the IRC has ever operated. We haven't seen it before.
It's the only time the IRC has operated is recently, and we haven't seen any sort of ping-ponging. Is that the word you used?
It is.
If that's the verb?
It
we
is.
haven't seen that ping-ponging before.
Really?
That didn't exist before.
And we couldn't have seen it unless we were beyond clairvoyant because the IRC didn't exist before.
This provision, I'd like to move on if we could and take a look at 5C, which is on page 8. This is the provision of the bill that essentially gives the legislature the ability to undertake mid-decade redistricting during this current election cycle. Is that correct?
No, that would be subject to the public's vote at a constitutional referendum.
Assuming the public, well, you were putting this forward
The earliest.
so that the public may vote on it. And so if the public votes and approves this, then it will allow for mid-decade redistricting.
The earliest there could be any mid-decade redistricting, if indeed there would be 2028.
That's the future legislation.
Will the 2020 census data be used when drawing the maps in 2028?
Of course.
And it's just, aren't we projected to lose seats in the next federal census?
No.
Again, I'm certainly not clairvoyant, so I do not know.
Well, my concern is we could be drawing maps in 2028, not only to have them dismantled, but if the projections are right, we'll be losing 2 seats in 2032. So does the bill anticipate that type of challenge? The proposal that we're giving to the members of the public, the voters?
I don't know that it's a challenge, and I don't know that the bill is drawn or drafted to address your fear.
There are no maps after the
I'm also concerned because there doesn't seem to be a trigger that allows the legislature to make changes to any of the existing congressional districts within the time frame this bill allows. Can you point to a trigger? Is there something that has to happen to allow or to initiate a mid-decade redistricting?
I am aware of no trigger.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. With my remaining time, Mr. Levy, I'm going to go on the bill. I do appreciate our conversation.
On the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Slater, and we'll disagree to continue to agree.
Sounds like a plan. Madam Speaker, more than 140 years ago, a young assemblyman named Theodore Roosevelt came to Albany and confronted political machines that used government power to protect themselves rather than serve the people. He understood a simple truth. Self-government only works when political power remains accountable to the public. Today, we are facing a modern version of the same problem. Not corruption in the traditional sense, but a political power grab, an effort to weaken the constitutional safeguards that stand between politicians and the ability to draw districts for their own benefit. You know, in Roosevelt's day, political bosses sought to choose the politicians who would serve them. Today, partisan gerrymandering seeks to choose the voters who will serve the politicians. That is precisely why the people of New York acted. In 2014, voters approved constitutional reforms, creating an independent redistricting process. And when asked again, they reaffirmed their desire for safeguards against partisan map drawing. They understood a principle that should transcend party. People should choose their elected officials, not elected officials choosing their voters. Yet this proposal that's being sent to the voters moves us in the opposite direction. It removes the bipartisan approval requirement that voters demanded and replaces it with a simple majority vote. That's not reform. That's not modernization. That's a political power grab. It takes authority away from a process designed to require consensus and places it in the hands of whichever party happens to control the legislature at any given moment. And we know exactly where that road leads us. We just lived through a budget process where one party control meant the majority could ultimately advance whatever it wanted. Now we are being asked to apply that same model to federal and state redistricting, the process that determines how New Yorkers are represented here in Albany and in Washington. Theodore Roosevelt fought political machines. This amendment empowers them. And let's be honest about what this debate is really about. If politicians can simply rewrite the rules whenever the political winds shift, then why ask the voters in the first place? Why have a constitutional amendment process at all? Why pretend this is about democracy if the answer can be changed whenever those in power dislike the result? The people of New York have already spoken on this matter. They voted for independent redistricting. They voted for bipartisan safeguards. They voted for a process that makes it harder, not easier, for politicians to manipulate district lines for partisan advantage. If Theodore Roosevelt were standing here in this chamber today, I don't believe he would view this proposal as reform. He would recognize it for what it is, a political power grab dressed up as a constitutional amendment. This debate comes down to a simple question. Do we trust the voters or do we trust the politicians? I trust the voters. People should choose their elected officials, not elected officials choosing their voters. For that reason, Madam Speaker, I respectfully urge all of my colleagues to vote no on this matter. Thank you.